everyone, welcome to Math Learning Hub, a hub for everybody who loves math. So I'm Chanya, and today we're going to be learning about what Roman numerals are and how to convert to and from Roman numerals. So basically, our number system is called Arabic numerals, but our number system is not the only number system that has been used in the world. There have been many different number systems, one of them being Roman numerals, which uses letters to represent numbers. So for instance, I have the letter to number mapping pulled up here. So where I represents 1, B represents 5, the letter X represents 10, the letter L represents 50, C represents 100, D represents 500, and M represents 1000. So jumping into using or assembling Roman numerals, let's start with the most obvious example, which is how to write number 1 here. So since I is the Roman numeral for 1, 1 is just basically 1I. Similarly, for the number 2, it's I, because there's basically two of the letter that represents 1, right? For 3, that's 3 I's because that's 3 of the letter that represents 1. So that seems fair enough, right? Let's look at some other examples. So what about 10? Well, 10 is just represented by an X. That's pretty similar to how we represented 1, right? Similarly, 20 is XX, and 30 is XXX. Same thing goes for this example in the chart L and this C, right? That's pretty straightforward. However, in Roman numerals, as you can see, a letter can only be repeated up to 3 times. If you look at any of these numbers, you don't see any letter being repeated in a row more than 3 times, right? And there is a reason for this. So first thing, only I, X, C, and M, which is 1, 10, 100, and 1000 can be repeated. But why can't they be repeated 4 or 5 or 6 times? Well, that's because of rule number 3. So if the larger value is written first, followed by the smaller value, you have to add the 2 values. So an example of this is the representation of the number 6. So you have V, which is the representation of the number 5. So V, I'm just going to write here, is 5. And then I here is, not 6. I is the representation for 1. However, since 5 is greater than 1 and 5 is written before 1 is, you add the 2 to create your value. So that would be 5 plus 1 is equal to 6. And we can see this rule rather in effect with the number VI, right? The number 6 and also the number 7 and the number 8, right? In all of these cases, the value of 5 is written before any smaller values of 1. So therefore, you add them together. However, if you have, for example, the smaller value being written first, let's take the number IV here. So IV, we all know that I represents the value 1, but V represents the value 5. However, since the smaller value is written before the larger value, you subtract the 2. So that becomes 5 minus 1, which is 4. And that's illustrated in this number here. So 4 is 5 minus 1. And I'll just make up another, oh, here it is. We can use 9 as an example. So I is the value for 1, x is the value for 10. But since the value for 1 is written before the value for 10, you subtract the 2 to get 10 minus 1, which is 9. So that's just an overview of the rules of Roman numerals. And now we're going to convert from and to Roman numerals from our own number system, which is the Arabic numerals. So for example, starting with the first example, if you wanted to convert Roman numeral XXVI to Arabic numerals, let me just pull up the chart here. Well, first, what do you notice, right? What do you notice? So let's ask ourselves, what is this portion of the number, right? What is XX? Well, we know that X is 10, so 2 X's would mean 20, right? So you have 20 something, and then so what's VI here? What's VI? Well, V is the value for 5 here. I is the value for 1. And since the greater value is written before the smaller value, you add the 2. So the 1 digit would be 5 plus 1, which is 6, right? So this would just be 26. So moving on to the next example. So Roman numeral CCXIX, right? Well, first we notice that there's 2 C's right next to each other. Well, the value of C is 100 from this table up here. So we know that we have to have 200 and then something else, right? 200 and then something else. Now we look at another part of the number. We look at X, right? We look at X. Well, okay. So basically, what is X? So X is 10. So it has to be 2 and then 1 something, 210 something, right? And then what's our last digit here? Our unit digit here is represented by these two, right? It's represented by these two, IX. Well, what's the value of I? The value of I is 1. What's the value of X? The value of X is 10. So since the 1 is written before the 10, you subtract the 2. So your unit digit would be 10 minus 1, which is 9. Okay. So now for the last one, which is a bit of a challenge. So let's work it step by step. So firstly, notice MM, right? MM. So M is 1,000. So 2 M's would mean 2,000. So it's 2,000 something. And then so, well, what do we have next, right? What do we have next? So we have C and D next. Well, D is 500, C is 100. But since the C is before the D, in other words, the smaller value is before the larger value, you have to subtract the two values. So you have 500 minus 100, which is 400. So next you have your next letters, which are X and L. Well, what's X, right? X is 10. What's L? L is 50. But since the 10 is written before the 50, since the lesser value is written before the greater value, you subtract the 2. So that's 50 minus 10, which is 40. So you have 2,440 something. And then what's left? Well, that's just an I. And the value of I is 1. So therefore, you should get 2,441. So I have them color-coded here. So if you want to pause the video and look, then that would be fun. Now we're going to move on to converting from Arabic numerals to Roman numerals. So for example, the number 32, right? If you wanted to write the number 32, you just think of, okay, how do you write 30? And then how do you write 2? So to write 30, well, that's just 3 x's, right? 3 tens, right? To write 2, to write 2 here, that's just 2 i's, right? 2 i's. So 32 is x, 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 I, right? Okay, similarly, what about 230? Well, that's pretty similar, right? So 2, you first have to figure out how to write 200, right? Because 2 is in the hundreds place. So you notice that C has the value of 100. So 200 would just be CC. Now, how do you write 30? Right? How do you write 30? Well, since you know the value of x is 10, you would just write 3 x's to represent the number 30 because, 3 tens gives you the value 30. And then for your units digit, that's just a 0. So you don't have anything else to worry about. So that's your Roman numeral representation. Okay, so what about we convert the number 193? Well, for the number 1 here, or in other words, 100, you think, well, how do I write this digit? Well, 100 has the value of C in Roman numerals, right? So that's all you need. Now you move on to the digit 9, which represents 90. So to make 90, you think, well, what is 90? 90 is 100 minus 10, right? 10 less than 100. So how do you write 100 minus 10? Well, in this case, you just write your value for 10, which is x, right before the value of 100, which is c. Remember, if the smaller value is written first, you subtract the two values. This is 100 minus 10 is 90. And lastly, you take care of this 3 here. Well, what is 3? 3 is just 3 ones, right? 3 is 3 ones. So it would be represented by I. So these would be your final answers. And let me just finish up a little bit of color coding here. And this should be basically it for our lesson on Roman numerals. Now, if I zoom out, I have written 2 practice questions here. Convert the Arabic numeral 3982 to Roman numerals and convert MMXXXIX to Arabic numerals. So I encourage you to try to answer these questions on your own and check your answers in the description. Well, anyways, this is the end of this video, and I hope this helped you learn a bit about Roman numerals. If you have any questions, then feel free to comment, and see you in the next video. Bye!